Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 17th Newmarket Town Council business meeting. We'll start, as always, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll accept a motion to seal the non-public minutes.
Motion to seal the non-public minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Administrator, the vote.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Pickering.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Levy.
Aye.
Counselor Nazaro.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Public forum to this capacity crowd. It will open at 7:06, and unless Mr. Mulaski has something to say, close at 7:06, since he's the only resident in the audience. I will accept a motion to approve the February 3rd non-public meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, discussion. And if there's discussion, we have to go into non-public. Seeing none, Mr. Administrator, the vote.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Pickering.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Levy.
Yes.
Counselor Nazaro.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
We'll accept a motion on the February 3rd, 2016 regular meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Counselor Thompson always has something to say. You
Darn it.
Give her a minute.
I know. Questions, I guess. Is this a good time to do that, or should I?
Is it questions on the minutes
Well, what's in the minutes?
What page?
4?
of the minutes or the packet? Does it say 4 in the bottom corner?
It says 4 in the bottom
That's the
corner
minutes.
of the minutes. Last paragraph, no, second to last paragraph, right above where it says committee reports in bold, Town Administrator Fournier stated that they were going to court on Friday for the case of the town versus the Eagles. And I-
We are not going to get into, we can wait
Okay.
till his report for him to
Yep.
give us that information. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Administrator, the vote.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Pickering.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Levy.
Aye.
Counselor Nazaro.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Report of the Town Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First item is unwritten report is the town versus the Eagles. From we received notice from the court at the end of the last week that we were successful in our attempts to evict them from the property. They have 14 days from the so of last Friday, Thursday. I think it was Friday. Thursday. To
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
be off the property. We are working with the Sheriff's Department and the attorneys, as well as the State Liquor Commission, to achieve that. So they are aware of that they need to be gone in 14 days. And when they need to be gone, it has to be a empty, clean building to be evicted, to get there, so.
Okay.
We were successful in that. On my written report, I will have another unwritten one, but I knew that was on the top of the list. I did want to thank everyone for their efforts during the presidential primary. We've always been expecting a large voter turnout for the election. What we weren't expecting were the number of curveballs that were tossed at us. For those who don't know, it started 2 minutes before the town clerk tax collector was leaving on maternity leave, when I had to tell her that the high school, which we were always planning to use all of our elections this year, was now out of commission due to a pipe burst. I mean, literally, she was packing up to leave. Then, when we were planning to move to the fire station, the Director of Public Works kept saying, nope, this location is fine unless there's a snowstorm. It was 60 degrees out when we were discussing the election, and we never thought we'd actually have a snowstorm. Well, that came to fruition as well. Everyone in every department pulled together to make this election go off without a hitch. From the police directing all the traffic to the Director of Public Works, Department of Public Works setting up, as well as fire. If you haven't seen the Wall Street Journal, there was a photo of Newmarket Fire Department setting up the booths in the Wall Street Journal. And just the fire allowing us to use their facilities and every other department support. In addition, there were the countless volunteers that worked that day. A special thanks goes out to the town clerk tax collector's office. Once again, they handled the situation calmly and professionally. Their dedication showed. I wish I did have a picture of Terry walking around the polling place with Madeline strapped to her, commanding the election officials of what to do that day. And I would put her dedication up against any town clerk in the state. I just want to publicly state that. The next item is that a group of students from the Newmarket Junior Senior High School government classes made a presentation to me about adopting a town flag. Many communities do have flags, and it would be a great source of civic pride. I'd like to have a small group of counselors meet with them and work with them on design and to provide input to them. If there's a group that's interested, I could provide them with name. I'd say no more than 3, just so that 3 is for more than 3 is a quorum. I don't think it would be that much work, but if anybody's interested.
Do we need to make a, formal motion for that, or you just want to just get names of people interested?
I think just names. It's an ad hoc committee. It's not a permanent. If anybody's interested.
You want to know now?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Anyone interested in talking about a town flag? I'll do it.
Okay. So it's Councilors Weinstein, Burns, and Nazaro.
Anyone feel slighted they were not on that? All right.
Okay.
thank you.
Just an update on the 2016 budget. We're roughly 59% through fiscal year 16. With that, we're on target with expenses at 58% of the budget expended. Fire's running slightly higher than budget due to the volume of calls that we've been seeing. Revenues are on target. We have increased our budgets for motor vehicle registration, and we're still running 5% higher than anticipated. On my unwritten report, before I get to the next 2 items, that one thing that we've been discussing and we're going to try to do is conduct a citizen survey. It would be an online survey just asking some basic questions of town services, asking what have they used in the last year, what have they experienced when using certain things, and just some demographic backgrounds. It would be an online survey. We're going to try it. We're trying to be pretty vague on this one because we want to see how it works first. The other option would be mailing it in, but it's difficult to get the mail-in surveys. So I've talked to a number of communities that have done it this way, and it's been successful. My goal would be to send it out sometime next month and probably do a rollout by having some flyers at the election saying, you'll be receiving, or please go to the town website to fill out a town survey. It's just an opportunity that we can see, you always hear certain things, but I really want to see the numbers of where opinions are on certain things. It's about a 30-question survey, and a good chunk of it has demographics, so it shouldn't take long as well. But I just want to let the council know that that's our intention. There's some sample surveys that we looked at to pull some questions together, and department heads are reviewing them now to add anything to it, and then we hope to go live, and then we'll get all the information and come back to the council with what we find out later this spring.
Before we get to the presentations that are in the rest of your
Yeah.
administrative report, questions on this or department head report? Councilor Watson.
I know that one concern with online surveys is that it doesn't always reach the elderly population, and a suggestion to have a couple computers set up at the senior center might be a way to and to have it at a particular time. You already have that in the works.
We're looking at 2 options, either doing that and providing a computer down there, or we could provide the senior center with hard copies, and we'll manually input them. And if anybody needs, and that's what I'm trying to determine that right now, that we could manually input some hard copies if there was an issue with computers.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's a good idea.
Other questions? Real quick on the survey.
Yep.
Who's authoring? Is it a one that you've purchased, or?
It's a sample one that the ICMA, the International City Managers Association, puts out. I looked at what I did also looked at what other communities did. They basically all use the same sort of format. It's very generic on what they're asking for department impact. It's not like, do you think that we spend too little, too much on X? It's saying, in the past 12 months, have you used the public library? Have you used police service? Have you used this? So you can see who's actually using what. Yeah. And I want to do it really vague and generic the first time to see how it works.
So, I don't want to get too in the weeds in it.
Yeah.
It's your thing, but So people get survey fatigue. So 30 questions is actually a pretty long survey.
Yeah, no, I know. That's what we're
And-
working on that.
If we're asking super general information that we're not really going to do anything with, like if we're going to ask a survey question, we should know exactly what our intention is behind the question and what we want to do with that data.
Yeah,
And like, so we start sending multiple surveys out, our response rate's going to go down.
and I think the first one is more, I shouldn't have used the term generic. It's more to get the base information.
You're getting baseline information so that future surveys we can compare
So
the
if,
baseline.
so if I said, if I look at these numbers and say, the town administrator's office is not responding, is a negative, then future I could say, okay, we have an issue here. Do we try to fix it this way? Do we ask, okay, what are the negatives? What are your experiences here? Try to address it that way. It's very macro,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, so I guess that I would just say, think about what questions you're going to want to know
Absolutely.
in the future.
Yep.
And ask the baseline now, because
Yep.
nothing will be more infuriating than being like, I wish I'd asked that as a baseline.
No, absolutely.
Counselor Pickering.
Is this idea based on calls coming in complaining about things, or?
No, it's a common practice in municipalities to do a citizen survey. I don't believe we've ever done one. Yeah,
We wait for people to show up with pitchforks.
right. And instead, we can try to find out some of the ideas beforehand. And too often, we only hear the negative. If there's something going very well, this will show that as well. And so I just want to see what those figures are.
Other questions on this or any of the department head reports?
And don't get me wrong, I know the irony of everyone just got done all their surveys for the last 3 months
Yeah.
on their phones, so I wanted to
Just
wait a
don't
little
do a
bit.
phone survey.
I'm not doing phones.
But that's fun.
Yeah.
You give them bum information.
Yeah.
Counselor Levy.
I did hear you say, or any of the other, okay. On page 78, this is probably an easy one. The last sentence, where it's getting into the water and sewer, and by the way, thank you for including the fiscal years, and it made it easier to compare. The only thing I'd say is, as a side note, that wasn't my question, but when the budgets change, it does kind of throw off a little bit, it's with the percentages, like if their budget went up 50 grand or 100 grand, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of hard to compare when they've spent 56% of their budget versus last year it was 50, but the dollars were different. Do you know what I mean?
I understand.
Excuse me. But could you explain that last sentence on where it says the water department has installed transducers in Bennett Way, et cetera, and then the last sentence says, at this time, we believe that the decline in the pumping groundwater levels is not due to well efficiency. Can you just briefly explain?
Sure.
that?
What the Water and Sewer Department did is that, as you know, our well levels are
Low.
So what they wanted to see was, is it something that's wrong with the mechanical portion of it? Are we not withdrawing the water efficiently? Is there certain times that we're
Open air.
doing things wrong? We're not. It's the decline in the water is because there's no water in the well.
Oh. Well, okay.
Yeah.
I might suggest then they might want to put one more sentence in there saying, the issue is lack of rainwater, I'm assuming, correct? Lack of rain?
It's, yeah, amongst others, yeah.
Are we making any rounds this winter? I mean, it seems like there's been rains, it's not.
Now. And just to let everybody know, it's not just Newmarket. It's a lot of the surrounding
drought.
seacoast communities. And it's interesting because there are some communities that are fine and some that are not. And some get their water off of rivers, and we get ours from wells, and a lot of the wells communities are having a tough time. And some have had a tough time much longer than we have as well.
Other questions? You got more?
Yeah, and maybe it goes to the question I had before. It said finance, my note was finance and human resources have spent 9% more than last year at this time. Is there a reason for that? If I looked at it's on page 90, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They were both, well, one was 9%, the other one was 8%.
Yeah, human resources was due to,
No, 9, both 9.
yeah, changes in the insurance products. We had a change in what the rates were going to be for property and liability as well as workers' compensation. Health, we had a slight increase because of change in census this year, in this fiscal year, so.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the second part of your report, which is the Mills Scenic Byway.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, Mike Provo is, and Tamara,
It's Tamara.
Tamara, sorry.
You don't even have to try.
Then that's what if I didn't get the first one, I'm not gonna get the second one.
I'm like Sharon.
Thanks.
The first name, don't worry about it.
They're both members of the Mills Scenic Byway Committee, and they want just to give you an update on the corridor management plan that was attached to the document. They're not asking for a formal vote. It's just that a letter of continuing support would be sent if there's no huge questions from the report. This is just a continuation of something that was done, I want to say 4 years ago. It was presented to the council to name Route 108 from Rollinsford through skipping Dover, we're going to jump over that, to Durham through Newmarket as a scenic byway because of the mill heritage there. Their intention is to Dover's going to hopefully rejoin.
You want me to?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. I was actually in Durham on Monday night, I'm on tour, and they agreed to write their letter of support. I was in Dover the previous week, and I met with an advisory board to their Chamber of Commerce, and the people who were initially a little opposed to having the scenic byway, there are less of them now, and so there's a really good chance that Dover is going to participate. But regardless of Dover, the draft that you got, when I was in Durham, we were making little additions and changes for each community. They asked that the RSA, the state RSA that indicates that local and municipal and state property rights around the byway are not impacted in any way by the byway. The byway has no legal power to dictate anything to the community or any landowners on the byway. And that RSA is a state RSA. It's available online, where you would go and look that up. But they wanted it actually in the plan. So on the third page of the plan that you have, that's going to be added right into the draft. The other change that we discussed with Durham is they would like to have their business loop added in, which is that one-way loop on Pettybrook Road that goes around and down through Main Street, and then it just picks the byway up again. And if we grab Dover, we will likely add their loop in too. So those are the only changes from the plan that you're looking at right now. The plan is a living, dynamic document. It is not meant to be static or set in stone. So as we go forward with the byway plan and we start to work with communities to use it as a tool for marketing businesses and promoting tourism, we can always make tweaks and changes if things arise that you would like to see added. So those are the changes so far. And there is a great group of volunteers, Michael's one of them, who have been working on this. I only was recruited to be part of it this past fall, but they've been working on it for about 4 years. Our hope is to get it through the state in May. They do consideration twice a year. It's May and at the end of the year, and I wanted a really aggressive timeline because I thought it would be great if we could start working on some of the marketing and promoting of the byway over the summer. So that's what I have. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Councilor Thompson.
Perhaps you could speak to the reason that this is going on. What is the benefit to communities to have this designation?
Yep.
For somebody that is watching and doesn't know what is the gain?
What I like to say is it's like having another leg on the stool. Most of the communities have a great historical society that's very active in their community, a chamber that's very active in promoting their community. All the communities on it have a thriving downtown now. Michael and I were actually out in the hallway talking earlier about some of these towns in the late 70s and early 80s. There was nothing. And we've done so much to revitalize that. The byway is just another way of communicating the connection between all of those communities and what we have in common. But it's a tool for people that are in the communities, businesses, and anybody who wants to use it this way to be part of another website, another way of marketing. We're going to have a website. We're going to have brochures. We're going to have a copy of the plan and the maps in all of the public libraries. We can certainly have a copy here, too. It's just another tool. It's not... It can be as much or as little as anyone in your community really wants it to be. One of the kind of things that I thought was really cool when I started learning about byways is that our byway actually meets all 5 of the, it's archaeological, historical, scenic, there's 2 others. We meet all 5. And a lot of byways in the state only meet 2 or 3. So we have so much going on. And I live in Rollinsford, almost at the mill, and I drove the whole byway to get here. It was kind of neat. So I'm like, oh, we're doing it right now. It's kind of cool. So, but anyway, I think that's if you go to Vermont, if you've ever spent any time in Vermont, a lot of the roads have 2 or 3 designations on them. It would be like the cheese route, and then it's also the Northeast Kingdom Byway, and there's 2. They really do a great job of.
There's a covered bridge and that's it, which is cool, but.
Right, but they do a
Gotcha.
great job of, anyone who's visiting the state has the ability to understand what they might want to see, where they might want to go. It's a marketing tool, so.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Councilwoman Sue.
You mentioned that Dover has some concerns. What happens to the project if they are not a part of it? Okay.
So I'll be super polite in my answer. What happens to Dover is everyone goes, why isn't Dover on the byway? And I will be asking Dover if they say, no, they're not going to be on the byway, what exactly would you like us to say? Because I feel like it's a mistake on their part to not be part of it. And you have a small group of people who have a fairly extreme political view suggesting that the byway implies something that really is not very realistic. And there were more of them when this began a couple years ago, and I'm now told there are fewer, although the issue did come up at the chamber meeting, and we spent quite a lot of time talking about it. So my feeling is, let them be on it or not. We can always add them in later. All the work has been done. Their whole part is completed, so everything about each community in the byway that you already have, that's done. And it would be very easy for us to add them in. There are a few steps. You have to reapply with the management plan once the community that was not included from the beginning adds themselves in. But it's not a difficult, it's doable. If they didn't make it this round and they wanted to be included later, they could be.
Council Thompson again.
Unless somebody else has got something. Is there a cost for a community to do
No
this?
cost. No cost. The committee that I am the chair of and Michael is a member of, we have members from each of the participating communities. We have a marketing strategy in the back of the plan and some goals for fundraising to do certain projects. Like we have a really neat logo design, and we'd like to make some like window clings for businesses on the route that want to be included. And they could have materials in their business that promote other materials. One of the examples I gave in Dover actually was there are a lot of restaurants now that do local food. So maybe someone wanted to go on a local dining tour, and each of those restaurants might want to, advertise they're on the byway together and do projects like that together. So whatever we do, we'll be fundraising for that. There's no cost to the community at all. I mean, we may come and ask you, do you want to contribute something to something we're doing? But there's no cost inherently in it. And of course, you can always say no to that, so.
Council Pike.
Yeah, I like doing drives, and there are other of the byways in New Hampshire now. There's several.
I believe there are 3 other byways, and then there are a couple of, like, the Kangamangas is actually national. So there's a couple of different levels of recognition.
Right.
And in the presentation that the Stratford Regional Planning Commission puts on, there's a little stat in there about how 40% of adults in America drive for pleasure. So it's a fairly popular recreational activity to find a route and go take a ride.
Yeah, I don't know if they're still as popular with the internet, but we always like the road atlases, the DeLorme road atlases, and they put those in there. So
All of these designations will show up on state material as well. So when the state is marketing tourism, it will be included in that. There's a lot of access to other ways of communicating what your community has to offer through the byway.
I was curious about when you said that Durham wanted to add their kind of their business loop into that. Does the community just decide they want some added in there? Is it have a mills? Does it have any sort of relationship to the mills, and what kind of a process do you have to go to say this belongs on the route or not?
It's pretty convenient for, like Rollinsford is a mill community just like you, and so is Dover. It cuts through Madbury a little bit too, like a little stick of Madbury sticks over 108 between Durham and Dover. The reason we thought that would be a good idea in Durham, is it cuts right off the end of it, like it's so close to going around the loop. But Rollinsford also changed the route. When the state first started talking about this byway project, it was going to be Route 4 straight out to Maine. And if you know Rollinsford at all, you actually have to turn down that farm road, Roberts Road, to go down to our mill. So the idea of the mills actually came from the fact that Rollinsford requested, the idea of the byway wasn't called the Mill Scenic Byway until Rollinsford said, can we divert it down to the center of our community and bring everybody to our mill? Because you know that we've had great success with our mill too, as you have here. And then that idea kind of sprung out of, oh, let's connect all the mills. And the way we do that is we have to go through those other communities that may not necessarily have a mill, like Durham, so how do we include them and make it like a decent ride that isn't just chopped up more than not having just over, you know? So that was kind of how I think that came about. And it's not a big deal. I mean, it's like, you know, that loop in Durham is really small, so. And that's their historic district, exactly.
The tourists in the downtown.
That's all
Yeah.
I'm trying to do is
Yeah.
get economic
Yeah,
activity.
exactly.
Other questions? Real quick, so no restrictions on property rights?
Nope,
Someone wants to put a fence up, they're not gonna all of a sudden
Nope.
find out it's a scenic byway
Nope.
issue?
nope.
And this is probably just more for the list on page 11. Like, why isn't the bandstand on there? Like, there's more, like, having been on the Veterans Memorial Trust Committee, there's like other things that we could,
Anything that you want to add, if you email it to us, we'll put it in.
that we should talk about.
Yeah, so anything.
I know the Veterans Committee will want all
Yeah.
this stuff.
We're still doing the inventory.
Yeah,
Okay.
anything can be added at any time, and you know, we're happy to do that. And if you look, there's a map in there that shows, one of the maps I love is there's a half-mile buffer on either side of the road, and it shows all the conservation land that touches at some point into that half-mile buffer. So there's a lot of, you know, detailed information in that plan, and we're happy to add more. Of the plans I've seen in New Hampshire, this is the most comprehensive and the most interesting by a mile to read, because the towns really did do their due diligence to put as much as possible in that they could, so that people would learn about it and know about it. I think it's great.
Excellent. Any other questions? We need a vote?
No, more of a comment. If there's no objection, what I'll do is forward a letter of support to the committee, just saying that the town is continuing their support as they have in the past.
With your signature on it.
Right.
Yep. And what we'll do is we'll take the 4 and hopefully 5 letters to the state in May, and the whole plan will go through, and then the other criteria that we had to meet to be qualified. And as soon as we know that the byway's been designated, the committee, of which I am the chair and Michael's a member, will contact you again to talk about plans that we have moving forward and maybe a timeline for things that we want to look at doing to promote and market the byway. Okay?
Excellent.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Of all the town meetings I've been to, you win the prize tonight for being the most civil that I've seen, and I think you should be very happy that it's that way.
Came to the wrong
See, I
meeting.
tell you.
Just a new
Maybe
practice.
maybe I just came at a good time. I'm gonna write a book. If you don't need anything else from
Nope,
me, and you're
all
all
set.
set? Okay, great. Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
You want to sit around, hear some non-civil? Matt,
Non-public and non-civil.
Yeah.
the wage plan. Is that what it's called, a wage plan now?
It's a wage
It's not just
survey.
a survey, a report?
I just quickly called it the wage plan, so yes, it's
Oh,
a
man,
survey.
plan sounds-
Plan's not
plan
until
sounds
you
pretty
adopt it.
formal.
Yeah. All right, I was allotted 20 minutes for this. I'm going to try to cut it down to 5. Okay?
'Cause I-
Yeah,
All right.
you're gonna get 20
I'm going to
minutes
go
of
through
questions.
this quickly. If you want to stop me, ask questions, please do. All right? So,
We could hold questions to the end, Matt.
huh?
We could hold questions to the end.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna just jump right into the second page where it's just the authority to conduct the wage plan. I just want to point out that in the town's charter, the town has to conduct a study of salary levels and make adjustments, recommendations to the town council at least every 3 years. And of course, these adjustments are going to be subject to the availability of funds. On to the next page. I just want to tell you how we conducted the study. The first thing is we looked at comparable communities, such as communities along the seacoast, communities of the same size, the same budget structure. We also looked at the delivery service model that each of the communities had. And then next, we looked at what they offered for a spread between their highest and lowest wage rate. So, say for example, you have a position like the Department of Public Works. What are you going to authorize the town administrator for a starting salary and a maximum salary for that position? What we found in that, for example, Durham uses 20% between their minimum and maximum. Franklin uses 31%. Hanover uses 51%. Another one that I'll leave nameless uses 103%, and we just chose 30%. It's kind of middle of the road. Okay. I'm actually going to skip this particular page where comparable communities. I just briefly spoke about that, and I'm going to go into the communities requested. I asked 30 communities to give me responses. I got responses from 14 of them. Here's the listing of all 30 communities. The ones that are highlighted in gray in the far left-hand column are the ones that responded. Okay, you know, they are Franklin, which is not nearby, but they're pretty much the same size, but not in tax base. Claremont's the same size. Hampton's the seacoast. Durham's the seacoast. Wyndham is has roughly the same size in town budget and services that we offer. So that's just a quick example. I'm going to skip the next page, which is the communities that responded, because they're in more detail in the prior page. Okay. Now, one of the things that we had to look at to make sure that when we're getting good data, we had to look at the comparability. For example, 13 of the out of the 14 communities had police chiefs. 5 of the communities only had a director of public works. 10 communities have a recreation director. 14 communities had a code enforcement officer. However, 4 communities had a water sewer superintendent. Newmarket's unusual where they're combined positions. Most of these have 2 separate positions for water and sewer. Okay. Unfortunately, some of that, the water and sewer, was not comparable. Now, let's look at some of the results of the selected positions. The police chief.
And before we get into select positions, I want to reiterate, this is not the individual, this is the position. So if you were to start a town and put it in Newmarket's spot, this would be the range that you would pay these individuals.
And let me kind of give you a little background on the pay range. When you take the 14 communities together, I come up with an average start and end point. Then you take the lowest amount and add 30%, and then that becomes the pay range, okay? Here, the recommended range for the police chief begins at $80,000, just over $80,000, and ends at just over $104,000. Currently, the chief is earning $92,717, and he is 96.6% of what you're currently paying the town administrator. The Department of Public Works only had 5 comparable communities, and amongst those communities, the wage range came out to $68,411 to $88,941. The current incumbent earns $86,736, and he's 90.4% of the town administrator's wage. The recreation director has 10 comparable communities. The recommended range came out to be $52,500 up to $68,000. The current incumbent earns $65,564 and is 68.3% of the town administrator. I'm going to skip to the next page. Now, when we do this kind of study, there are some that come out below what the wage range was calculated at. And I gave you a couple examples here that are below the minimum wage range, such as the Channel 13 technician, the welfare director, the firefighter 1 and 2, the foreman, solid waste laborer, and 1 police lieutenant. Now, if we were to increase all of those positions that fell below the wage range, it would only increase our budget by $24,526 to get them up to the minimum. And that only includes their salary, FICA, and Medicare. Okay? Now, finally, what are the next steps that we have to do to complete this? We have to introduce a resolution to the town council to approve or accept the wage plan. And then we have to make recommendations to the town administrator if we're going to bring people up to the minimum. And then also, we have to revise all the job descriptions in the town.
You done?
Questions?
Just a couple
Yeah.
of comments. One, as we are in the budget process where we are, we did not budget for this.
Yeah.
So that would have to be determined. Again, this is not a reflection of the individuals in the positions. This is what the market, from our analysis, is going for these positions. We did use this as a base, even though it wasn't official, when we hired the executive assistant in my office to say, okay, where is the fair market right now for the positions? Basically, what we'd be doing is taking the list of the positions, minus those who are separate, who are not falling under the personnel plan, which is only 1 position. And you put the range in, and you say, okay, if we're hiring for this position, this is where you'd fall. Every 3 years, we do the review, and we adjust those figures, so you have a range where we get. Are there employees that are above the range? Yes, there are. Instead of penalizing employees that are above, you freeze the employees. So you don't add any, which we have been doing, you don't add any additional funds to the base salary. It's just this is a common tool that we should have in place.
I want to jump in too. I think for the most part, this plan validated what a majority of the employees are earning.
Right.
Especially considering their experience and their years of service.
Meaning validated in what respect, Matt? It justified? Or
Yes, yes. So for those that are not over and those that are not under, you can see that they fell right. Like if you look at the bottom of the range, that would be an entry-level person. At the top of the range would be someone that's highly experienced and has lots of years of service. Those that have lots of years of service are up towards near the top of the range. For example, the recreation director has many years of service, and he's closer to the top of the range. So to me, this plan is validating a majority of the positions, such as the recreation director.
I've seen these in many communities, and I've seen them that they come in and say, you've got 25 to 40% of your employees over the top. You get it, that's not correct. Or you go the other way, you've got 25 to 40% below where they should be. We don't have that. We're right on target. So it's not a real difficult thing. It just gives us the actual plan of where they would fall, each of these positions in the future. Yeah.
Questions? Councilman.
On page 113, it's under
It's the positions that warrant attention.
It's under the below minimum. I just had a couple of questions, Matt.
Yep.
Do these employees' responsibilities, and I'm paraphrasing my questions because it's so, take it with a grain, do the responsibilities match up, I don't know another word other than used exactly, but as close as possible to the other towns that you're comparing them to? In other words, the roles that these people are doing in Newmarket in the other towns, because you had a bunch of towns mentioned, if you lined up the responsibilities of each town,
Yeah.
do these line up? You know,
Yes.
I'm assuming the firefighter, for example, does. I didn't know about the Channel 13 technician. You know, I wasn't sure if it was all apples for apples. But I'll finish quickly. I just want to. Also, do the years of service, and this is all in relation to the other towns that you're comparing it to, do the years of service as well as other factors factor in as to how these employees are compensated in the other towns? I'm not suggesting that there should be an adjustment, or that there should not be an adjustment to the salaries. I would just like to know if we're comparing apples to apples.
Okay, let me start with your last question about the other towns and what they're compensating. All I asked for from the other towns was just their wage range, not what their incumbent was being paid.
Well, wouldn't that be the wage range?
No. The wage range, getting tongue-tied, excuse me, is if that position was vacant, you should hire a person between the bottom and the top of that. That's what that position, its salary is going for. The incumbency isn't what we're looking at.
Okay.
We're looking at if the positions are vacant, what do you hire these positions for?
If we looked at what the current incumbent is, it takes into factor their experience and their years of service. So we might have, say for example, we have an experienced police chief. What happens if all the communities that responded had inexperienced police chiefs and at the bottom of their range, then it would look like that we're overpaying our police chief. So all I did was just look at their range, not what their incumbent is.
And the responsibilities, did they line up?
The responsibilities lined up, there are certain ones that didn't line up well, and those really fell in water and sewer, town planner, the ones that really had low comparabilities. Like those that responded that have a police lieutenant, those job duties are pretty much the same, no matter where you go. The solid waste laborer is pretty much the same. Channel 13 technician, his system is comparable to other communities.
What about the foreman? Because I didn't even know what this was a foreman for.
The foreman,
Building and grounds, DPW.
yeah, is for Public Works, and works directly underneath the Director of Public Works.
Okay, so that's the only foreman we have here.
Yeah, that's correct.
And all towns that have a foreman only work for, like, DPW?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just comparing those within that particular department against themselves.
Thank you.
Just the one that's universal. Statutorily, the police chief is universal. Because there's a law that outlines the duties of a chief for police. I mean, the town administrator position isn't the same in every community.
And I
Yeah.
think you could have more than one foreman.
Yeah, but that's what they look at, though, is the comparison of what they do and the duties. They're part of the research.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Pickering.
Just to make it clear for everyone, I hope it's clear, I recalled that the town council did one of these back in the 90s. Now I'm thinking 1990s, not the other one you're thinking about.
Historically, the last one that was conducted was 2005. I don't believe, was that ever adopted?
I can't find any evidence of that.
So there is a salary survey out there that was adopted.
What did it reflect?
It basically saying there wasn't much difference in it. It outlined what the minimum and maximum for the market in 2005 should be.
No, but I mean, did it confirm that the town was essentially on target with its salaries?
Yes, the same at that point. But it was never implemented, so we never had a base document for when hiring. If you ever see an advertisement for a municipal position, there's always a line that says, salary says this to this, usually not to exceed the middle. So that's basically, you can tell that these municipalities have already done this exercise.
when I went through all of these communities, they gave me what their wage plan looks like, and I tried to base our wage plan in appearance on all the other communities, so that we can, going forward, be more comparable with the communities that we're aligned with.
Matt, you said that, or you said there were people that were over. How many people do we have over?
I want to say there's about 2 or 3.
And they're frozen going forward.
Correct. And I've discussed it with them, not even prior to the salary survey. I looked at it. I could tell that the market, they were higher than the market. In discussing with the employees, I would say, look, we can't add to your base salary at this point because you're higher than the market. But some of them were performing great, so we gave them bonus funds from there, so it didn't go to their base.
For the individuals that are below minimum, have we seen a lot of turnover in those positions?
Firefighters.
Has that driven turnover? I guess is the question.
We've had turnover in the firefighter positions, the foreman
That's
position.
because we have UNH kids and there's always turnover.
No,
And
that's
it's solid
volunteer.
waste.
Oh, this is permanent.
This is a permanent full-time. My feeling on the firefighter is yes and no. Partially salaried, but partially the desire to go to a fire department that's 24 on, 24 off schedule, with more full-time firefighters. They just feel it would be a bigger opportunity for them.
So are these towns that have majority volunteer departments and only several full-timers? Or is this just based on what full-time firefighters get?
This is just based upon what full-time firefighters get, because if you look at the 14 communities, some of them, like Claremont, have a full-time fire department, and other communities like Newcastle.
So I'm guessing if this 24,526 is salary, FICA, and Medicare, these people can't be off that much.
No,
These numbers got to be pretty close,
no,
right?
they are close.
Yeah.
Like, we're not wildly off even
No.
at the low end.
Well, let me give you some examples. One of them, the lowest one that I have listed in those examples, it would only change our budget by $839. However, the highest one in here would change the budget by almost $6,500.
So we're not voting on this tonight.
No, we just want to give the information. What will come next would be what you'll see is an addendum to the personnel policy, which would say, if you are in this position, we are setting the wages between this and this. And that would be addendum to the personnel policy, so when we're hiring somebody, you will see where we would hire that position at. And every 3 years, the town administrator should come in with an update to that. And if the council doesn't adopt it, we stay at status quo, but my duties per the charter is we have to present this to the council.
Could we see what the current range is against the new proposed range in that
Sure.
resolution? Run it back up to it.
Yep.
Okay, I'll get that to Steve.
Other question?
It's more of a general, if, because I almost feel like this is a personnel issue, meaning some of this conversation deals with personnel. Obviously, it all deals with personnel. But let's say you have a position where, let's take a town administrator. That is total hypothetical.
Yeah.
Let's say
Let's say we don't have, let's say a street sweeper, because we don't have somebody who actually goes out and physically sweeps the street.
Okay, so you wanted.
We'll do it that way, because honestly,
Okay,
when I
so
said the
let's-
one position that
perfect.
isn't
So
in
let's
it
say-
is the town administrator.
Let's say the street sweepers, say that fast.
Yeah.
Have to have a degree in a certain street sweeping.
Mhm.
Now, obviously,
Yeah.
what you chose did not help me.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I was thinking more of a higher salary, higher end salary. And most of the towns, that degree was a prerequisite,
Mhm.
okay? But it is not a prerequisite to having that job. For example, in Newmarket,
Mhm.
okay? how do we factor that in, Steve?
That's
That's why I picked, you, when I say you, I meant the position.
Well, the reason why I didn't want the public or the rest of the council to realize that when I said the one position that's not covered by the personnel plan, it's the town administrator.
Okay, I got a better one. Let's say if we had a full-time finance person.
Yep.
They had to have a CP, they had to be a CPA.
Yes.
No, I'm. 'Cause,
Yep, that's fine.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
That's more
Yep.
fear, I think. And all towns had CPAs for their finance directors, okay?
Yep.
That we were comparing to. But Newmarket didn't have in its charter that we had to have a CPA. In a way, and if then we were gonna meet comp those towns' salaries, correct? And we chose someone to do the job because we didn't feel it was absolutely incumbent upon them to have a CPA degree. But we paid them a little bit less because they didn't have that degree. How do we factor that in on some of these? Because it does apply. I'm not using
Yeah.
a good example, but I think it makes you following.
Traditionally, you start at the bottom. If they don't meet all the requirements, one, your job description should reflect also what the salary range is. So if Newmarket says we don't require a CPA, but Durham does, our scale would be a little different, because we're not comparing apples to apples
And that's
there.
what I was,
And we do
couldn't
get
find
there.
in this.
Yeah, and we do get, and that is part of this, because there are no positions there are no cookie cutter positions except chief of police because of the law. So that's the only one that you could really say, look, the duties of a chief of police is pretty much across the board the same. But for example, the planner is not in every community. There's different titles for what is done in each community. So that's not one that would be. But yeah, your job description should reflect also what the salaries do. That was taken into consideration with these figures as well, as what our job descriptions of what we have are being done. And that's the next thing, is to update the job descriptions to reflect exactly that.
Okay. I'm good for now.
Councilor Weinstein.
Thank you.
Steve, if we have a resolution and we adopt the wage plan, does that automatically appropriate the 24,000?
No.
Okay.
Now, we have no, I would have to, if, I would come back to the council to transfer funds if that were to happen. I don't have the funds to do it right now, so I would have to wait. So no, it does not appropriate anything. It's just basically, you're setting a policy, you're amending the personnel policy to include this schedule in there.
You're authorizing the town administrator to pay people within this range, and then it's his discretion to pay them within it, based upon their years of service and their salaries, and their education.
So you're not automatically forced to find $24,000?
No.
No.
But while you're on that subject, though, what if somebody said, I would work here for less? You're not allowed to go below that?
Oh, no, I
point?
take that. No. Yeah, no, I can. No, I can.
When you
Yes, you
set
can.
this range, you lock in yourself in.
No, you're not, you can, it's only recommended, you can, on the other side, is if I came into the council and said, look,
The only way we're gonna get them is to pay them more.
right, we can waive it, right. I can ask for a waiver.
Okay, so it's really not
It's guide-
obligated us to
It's
anything.
guidelines.
It's a guideline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
I foresee that we will be back before the council, making adjustments to this, asking for movements, but hopefully those are rare. Just look at this as being a baseline.
And it's common to ask for, in municipalities, ask for waivers if you get a position that's it's very high.
Okay.
Other questions? Last question. So you say you're going to edit the job descriptions. You're just editing the salary range in them, right? You're not changing job descriptions.
We want to make sure the job descriptions actually reflect what they do.
Yeah. Because remember,
They should reflect what we want them to do, right?
Right, yeah, that's what we mean.
the last time they were revised was 2005,
Right.
Yeah.
10 years ago.
So I guess we'll see a resolution
Yep.
in the near-term future.
Yep.
Okay?
Thank you very much,
Thanks, Matt.
Committee reports. Councilor Burns.
The Conservation Commission met. It was a pretty quick meeting. They touched on some land maintenance, and then They're also still discussing those kiosks that were damaged. There were 2 kiosks in a couple of the parks. And they're getting some quotes, and they're actually looking at trying to reduce the cost of getting those rebuilt by doing the work themselves and purchasing the material themselves. And then that's pretty much it. We also brought up the kayak committee and the event. They were very interested in that. So, yeah, hopefully we have a couple more committee members coming. So, that's it.
Questions for Council Burns? Other committee reports? That's right.
Yeah, we had the dam committee met with 2 engineers from DES, and I think the one thing about this dam committee meeting is it was recorded. So anybody out there that is particularly interested in where we currently stand and where the discussions went with the state, there is a recorded meeting that you can watch that and go into great detail on it. And the focus of this meeting, and most of it, is the presentation of I think it's Gary LeMay is his name, from Gomez and Sullivan, and it is a detail of what has sort of moved from Wright Pierce to Gomez and Sullivan. That's not the whole thing, but the differences between the reports. Again, it's worth remembering that Gomez and Sullivan was not technically looking at flood conditions as the basis. This was looking at dam removal and flow conditions of dam removal. But as was told the town at the time of that study, was that a lot of this information would be very useful as we move forward, and it is. I'll just so there's a lot of detail in that. That presentation was 45 minutes or more, so I'm not going to attempt to recapture all of that. But I think some of the concluding comments, there's a new engineer from the DES that is assigned to it beyond chief of the department, who is Steve Doyen. There's a new guy, Jim Weber, I believe is his name, and they are largely agreeing to the model modifications that Gomez and Sullivan has recommended. They weren't giving conclusive answers. They will be looking at this, taking this under advisement. But they did make a comment that I thought was positive, and Steve Doyen made the comment that they thought that this it was really important to codify and really nail down these numbers. So the process that we went through of having a sort of a negotiation, an understanding about the numbers, so that we can be, it's agreed, it's well recorded that it's agreed. It was an important part of where we're going with this, and the other thing that I thought was significant at that meeting and could be really important for us on a cost basis. I mean, there's one part of it is, yes, the height of the abutment walls, but this was one of the first times where I had heard some optimism that not only, we've been talking about keeping the dam for some time now, but a lot of those discussions still opened the possibility of having to modify the gates area of the dam in a way that would be difficult to do with an old granite dam. And I felt that, we had conversation about the desirability of not doing that. And the comments from the state were more favorable than I'd heard before. And the changes that have come about through this reconciliation of models are favorable to that as well. So that's where we stand now.
Questions on the dam? Other committee reports?
I haven't. Do you have a committee report?
No, I was going to just give you a quick update. I spoke briefly with Diane and I think they're working with Stratford Regional on the master plan, and I was, we had sort of tried to set a target date, so maybe, Mr. Administrator, you could, for our next meeting, maybe just give the council a brief update. Is it feasible by the end of our fiscal year? Because that was sort of the goal we had for the committee, that once they implemented that, they would be able to move forward with some kind of list for the council to consider for implementation, for the elderly facilities and whatnot. They were going to, I think they were using John Connery's list. Go ahead.
My understanding was that they would come up, they would review it and propose if there was a zoning amendment to the council by the end.
By the end of the fiscal year.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah, are we on track for that?
Year.
Yeah, because I think that was the goal of Diane and Val, who's a representative of the planning board on the EDC. So I'm just trying to keep it moving a little bit if we could, just to know what's going on. Thank you.
Councilor Pike, you got another committee?
Planning board met last evening.
You are.
So, a couple of, what's that?
Making up for lost time.
Yeah. There were a couple of, there was one that was accepted, a lot line adjustment over on Hersey Lane. There was nothing controversial presented. The Grape Street project, that was continued. So it was a fairly brief meeting, and it was barely got quorum. So, and the subcommittee to meet on the master plan changes that's supposed to take place before the EDC recommendations. They're trying to set that meeting for beginning of March. Diane's working on that meeting.
Good.
First thing we did. Here you go. Any other committee reports? It's a committee I'm not on as a counselor, but I'm on as a citizen. The Veterans Memorial Trust Committee is having its annual golf fundraiser on May 14th. So if people want to play or sponsor, we're going to get the website. We'll get it to the town to put on the website and on Channel 13. All right.
To be thinking about spring.
I know. Yeah, I know, right? This is the time to do it.
Yep.
Start talking about golf. Councilor Pickering.
Could I go back to Dale on reference to
Yeah.
the dam committee? I did watch that meeting, but to be honest with you, I sat there with a clicker in my hand in case I had to change channels, but I didn't find that I needed to do that. There's a lot of interesting things stated. One thing I would like to ask you, if your memory is better than mine, which wouldn't take much. It was stated, and this isn't the first time we've heard this, that the alignment of that bridge actually creates part of the problem we have at that dam site. And I know the state of New Hampshire is not going to fork over enough money to rip down what we have and align that bridge in a way that'll fix the so-called problem that it created by placing it the way they did.
Well, I think, at least the way I understand it, the situation with the Newmarket, the bridge over 108 you're talking about,
That's all.
the place where that came up as a factor, and I really don't remember so much our discussion of it recent, but it's come up before,
Yeah.
because it goes back to one of the original reasons why citizens sort of petitioned to have the dam declared a hazard dam and taken out. People that wanted it taken out was hopes that it would reduce flooding up above. And that bridge turns out to be controlling, so that even if you took the dam out, under a high flow event, the bridge constricts flow because it sits at an angle to flow. And so the amount of flow that would go through there, the level of water, the amount of flooding reduction that you would see, that was something that was in the Gomez and Sullivan report. Is essentially, had we taken if we had gone down the road to taking the dam out, you weren't going to change flow. You weren't going to change flooding at a high water event. If you get another 100-year flood, you still have the same amount of flooding. So that's that.
That's heartwarming.
This is all for none.
Nobody wants, I won't say nobody, but certainly the community, the sentiment of the community that we heard at the dam committee was that they would like to keep the dam if possible. So and I think it may even be, when we have a number, when we know what it's going to cost, it could easily be less expensive than taking it out. I think that's part of what's driving this. The other part of it that I think a lot of talk about, though, it has to do with the flow split and the fact that historically, before 108 and the culverts went up in there, a lot more water used to go up to Oyster River when you had high water events. And it was as the 108 was built higher and potential changes were going on, that essentially it made a secondary dam that moved water down towards the Lamprey, the McAllen Dam. And as they talk about changes to culverts, and not only for 108, but the Long Marsh Road is also a secondary barrier to flow. And that's talking about culverts there before they get flooding. And so that's one reason why, that there's an awareness on the state that, that Oyster River Dam is also a hazard dam, also need a lot of extra flow going its way. But, I think confidence the state is, no more water will come Newmarket's way, and any change, there's a good chance that it will help in that sense and move it back to where things were historically, because the culverts need to protect the roads. So I think that's what you're...
Yeah. Thank you. I guess my thought process with the question was, is there anything the state could do to help on the side of that 108 Newmarket Bridge to do something there where it could alleviate the misaligned bridge placement?
The 108 Newmarket Bridge, I don't think, other than replacing that bridge, I don't think much is going to do that. Since we're not, it only really becomes a substantial issue if we were going to take the dam out. Since the direction we're moving now is to hopefully keep the dam, then whether the bridge is realigned or not, the flooding is not going to change. If both things were changed, then you might change it, but that's not likely to happen. The bridge has got years of life left, so.
Thank you. Anything else? Old business. I will accept a motion to approve Resolution 2015-16-33, resolution relating to the purchase of a bucket truck.
So moved.
Amy B. Is there a second?
Second.
Tony. I'm assuming the reason Director Mulaski is here is to talk to us about a bucket truck.
Thank you. I'll begin with just a little history on kind of how we ended up with the truck and how we got there, and just to give you a little background. Back in the day, we were fortunate enough to have somebody that worked for public service that lived in town, was on the fire department. Probably all remember Herb Philbrick, bless his soul. But back in the day, it was kind of okay. They would be up there working and kind of take care of the fire alarm, because we're next in line on poles. It goes PSNH, fire alarm, cable, telephone. So he finally retired, and then we were fortunate enough we had an individual that had his own fire alarm company, and he had the equipment and the means to be able to maintain that. So in 2000, when we lost that ability, we found a used truck that was in fairly good condition, and we purchased it, and it was purposely for the fire alarm system. We have a municipal fire alarm system that we solely maintain at the fire department. It's throughout most of the community. It goes on town line to town line on 108, the more populated areas of the town, not so much out on the outskirts. But it's a very large, complex system, and we maintain that ourselves, and we've done that for years. As long as it's been in service, it's just been the fire department's one of our roles to take care of the system. So we were always kind of fortunate. So anyways, we purchased this used truck. It was a a 91, 92-ish model, because there's two components there. There's the lift and then there's the chassis. And we utilized it all these years, and in the interim, we've, after we did purchase this, we've done a lot of things where we've added a lot of ornamental lighting. And when you see those lights downtown, those are our lights. We maintain those lights, we take care of those lights. It's not like the street lights on telephone poles and so forth. We contact PSNH and they just go take care of it. The town has grown, obviously. You know, we used to have 2 flagpoles, now we have 12 flagpoles. Everything's higher and bigger and better and so forth. And the days of jumping in the loader bucket and just lifting somebody up have all gone bye-bye too. So that's kind of how we ended up with a bucket truck.
That should never have happened, but okay.
Well,
Never did, never saw
well,
it.
20 years ago, you know, anyway, we don't do that anymore. We wouldn't do that.
Good statement.
But I'm just trying to give you like the history real quick. So that's kind of how we ended up with it. So believe it or not, we have over 100 of those poles now in town that we maintain. The blinking flashing lights, those are ours, so forth. We've added more buildings, the higher lights. We don't do things on ladders now. It takes 2 people, someone has to foot the ladder, they have the bucket truck, they go out, one guy takes care of things. So life is great. So this truck's been in the CIP
life is
schedule.
great, Jesus. That
Well-
was a good one.
It makes things simpler and easier, I guess, to function. But, so it's been in the schedule. It was in the schedule to be replaced a few years back. It got added, I believe, in 2002 after we purchased it and realized we added it to the CIP schedule to the fleet. So we've been looking long and hard for a year with Auto Excellence, with the companies, trying to find a used truck. Something that fits our needs and abilities are hard to come by. But I've spent the last year honestly seeking, gone and looked at used vehicles and had Auto Excellence look at these vehicles, and nothing that we would like to put our hands on, unfortunately. We had an opportunity potentially to find a demo. They come and go so quickly. So basically, what you have before you now is to purchase a new truck. It's 10 feet higher, which is something that's been kind of a battle for us too. Our truck is 29. This working height will give us another 10 feet, more fit our needs. But this vehicle is actually more utilized now, so much for the fire department, but Public Works for maintaining all the municipal buildings and site lighting and flagpoles, you name it. The decorations, the ornaments, the banners, all the different events. The truck is honestly used 2 to 3 days a week, half hour here, but it's used that much. It fits our needs, and the lifts, the rolling lifts and so forth, wouldn't fit our needs because we're out on ball fields, we're on slopes, we're on roads, we're in parking lots, so you can't just run those types. When I say that, those are the types of lifts you'd see like a Caprioli painting. They're kind of, they don't have a truck component, and it doesn't work so well with the fire alarm. But our truck is currently going to be 25 years old. There's 2 inspections that have to be done on it, one for the vehicle and one for the lift. The vehicle is in more of a rougher shape than the lift. We did have an evaluation, which I provided from the company, to look at maybe just utilizing our lift on a new chassis. And there is potential to do that, but no one was real comfortable saying, go ahead and do that, because it's at its life expectancy. We could really start having problems with that. Auto Excellence has recommended replacing the vehicle, and we went out and got proposals. We got 2 back with RBG, of Raymond being the cheapest. Everyone in the department is certified to operate the bucket trucks currently, and that's something that we continuously do with new employees if they're not certified. And I provided you with a lot of backup, I know, and that's kind of where we are with the vehicle.
Questions? Councilor Pike?
On the fire alarm system, I'm interested in that. You described it, sounded like it, it's sort of a historic almost. I mean, it's been there a long time.
Yeah, that would be you see the red master boxes throughout town. Some of them are on buildings, some of them are on poles. We currently service around 200 properties, I believe, where it rings in, we monitor them, and we bill the property owners for that service. And it's really old technology, but it works good, and it's kind of cheap to maintain for the most part.
If you don't have to buy too many $80,000 trucks.
No, and the other thing with this is, this vehicle, I'm confident we could get 20 years out of the vehicle, a life expectancy for us. We got 25 out of the one that we bought used, but we definitely, I feel confident that we could get 20 years of useful life out of this vehicle, starting with it from new.
So I guess just the question I was going to ask that is, so there's not a, in this age of, wireless technologies and everything else like that, if communities are starting over and putting in fire alarm systems of a similar purpose, is there something that's dramatically cheaper, easier to do if you didn't have the old historic one, or is that still the best?
There is what they call radio boxes now, but it's very expensive and more expensive to maintain. This is just 2 copper wires, and it's
Okay.
real basic with a tapper,
Okay.
with a Keltron. It's very expensive to switch to that technology, so that's why we haven't done that. And you'll see, like, the city of Portsmouth, a lot of the bigger communities, or communities that have the master boxes, have kept them. Some have gone, I believe Exeter may have gone to radio boxes. I think Newington may have. But it's expensive, and it's more technical to maintain.
The
current-
radio boxes are.
Yes,
Administrator,
yes.
I think, has.
Yeah, I want to clarify something before we get too far. This is not for the fire department or the alarm system. Originally, this was purchased to maintain those wires. That's not what it's used for any longer. It's used for public works duties 95% of the time, if not higher. This is it basically replaces what you used to see, people putting ladders on buildings and climbing up because of liability with ladders. One of the big things, this actually does impact our liability insurance for the positive, because you don't have as many falls from these as you do for ladders.
So most communities of similar size have the bucket
Yes.
trucks now?
Yeah.
Yes, communities just like the town with Durham has it, Exeter has it. Communities very similar to Newmarket all have them, and that's the biggest thing is safety. Workman's comp, insurance, and safety. Everyone's harnessed in, locked in when they're in the bucket truck. And this newer truck does have some newer safety features that aren't in the current truck. And but that is a big, I did forget that. Thanks for bringing that up, Steve.
Okay.
That accounts for packing up more.
No, I was just curious, so what percentage of the use does go to the fire department? Just
I would
curious.
say less than
We
90.
We typically, I would say 10 times a year, I'm out in that, doing something. We're working on the system.
But most of the time, you see the buildings. Not only is it not only public works, buildings and grounds specifically use it for maintenance of the buildings, lights, facilities that you would need to reach the roofs and the higher portions that we don't. If we didn't have it, you'd probably have to contract out with a bucket truck.
Councilor Thompson.
I have a few questions. You said you sent out 4 requests. You got 2 back. I saw 1 in the packet. Did I miss the other one?
The
Just not see
RBG
it?
and Q's sent us in a proposal.
I don't think it was in the packet.
The other bid, I apologize that it didn't make it in the packet. The other bid was from Q's,
Okay.
and their bid was for the same, essentially the same exact apples to apples, $85,521.
Okay, so marginal difference. Did RBG see our bucket truck and our lift? Did they do a visual inspection of it? I know Auto Excellence did, but
They did.
there was some reference in here to that they had spoken with you by phone, and it wasn't clear to me whether they had actually come and looked at
No, he did a physical inspection in our garage, came to our garage and did the inspection.
Okay. So if I'm reading this right, if we just get the truck, that is 50 to 55,000 of the 84,000, which leaves that the lift alone would be 30 or 35,000?
That would be if we, those dollar amounts would be if we got a new chassis.
The chassis
and
only.
Utilized our existing lift, took it off and mounted it on a new chassis.
Right. But based on the difference between the 50 to 55 for the chassis only versus adding the lift in for what we've got a quote for is 84,000.
No, the 50 to 55 was to buy a new chassis and pull our lift off our current vehicle and mount it on a new chassis. That was a
Right.
range.
You're both are saying the same thing.
I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
So to put a new lift on a new chassis
It's additional 30.
is an additional 30 or 35, 30 to 35,000.
Yes.
Okay. Can we shop the lift separately? Was that looked at?
Nope.
You know, is that a good price for just a lift if we break it down? What does a 38-foot lift go for?
I did not break it down off the lift,
Okay.
just a lift.
My other question is, we have a 29-foot lift now. The new one would be 38. What are we missing now that we can't reach for another 7 feet? And then what would be the cost of a 29-foot lift? Do they still make them?
I do not know the answer to that. I can ask the individual from the company that did the evaluation,
Okay.
if you'd like.
What are we missing? Are there things where we're standing on our tippy toes to reach another X number of feet? Are there things that we have to rent a
We are
bigger
a little
bucket truck
short
for?
in some areas. We are short, and sometimes we do have to hire out somebody to take care of that and address it.
Okay,
There
and
are
they
some
br-
things we let go.
And they bring in a truck that is how big of a
A
lift?
bigger lift, I
50 feet?
usually used, Next Gen usually comes in to assist us if there's something we can't handle.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's my question, is the difference between the 29-foot to the 38-foot that we have now, and if, for the 38-footer, are we still missing things? You know, does that give us an ability to reach 2 out of 100 more things, or 98 more out of 100 things? I'm just not sure what we're missing with the 29. You know, are we not reaching the top of the light poles? How often does it happen, Rick?
We'll reach all our light poles, we'll reach our flag poles, we'll reach our building heights. We typically see that. They're gonna be putting some taller poles in with a new project they're proposing up 152. But we'll be able to reach everything that's gonna be within our means for fire alarm, for street lighting, site lighting, building lighting.
Can we do that now, most of the time? Give me a percentage that we can reach with a 29-footer.
There are times where it's difficult to reach, for instance, the town hall. We'll be able to reach to the top. Right now, we can't go above the third floor windows. If we wanted to clean the windows on the town hall, we can't do the third floor windows. We can make it just to the sill,
I'm looking for.
just to
Okay.
give you a perspective on something for height.
Okay. I think you sort of answered the question before. We bought used before, and we got 15 years out, and we got 15 years out of it. How much did we pay for that used truck? Do you remember?
I want to say it was around $10,000. I believe it was 10,000.
Okay. But I appreciate you saying that you had looked for used
I have.
before. Seems to me there might be something out there.
So, quick follow-up on that one.
Mhm.
He did come in to me with a demo at one point, and it was above my ability to purchase, so we couldn't do it. So, yeah, he did come into me a couple times saying he did have a demo, and we could not act on it.
For how much?
5,000 less, maybe?
Yeah, it wasn't a lot less. Yeah.
Say that, Counselor Thompson? Well, we'll give someone else
Yeah.
a chance. And Counselor Pickering.
Rick, I didn't come here tonight to try to talk you out of needing what you need. I understand what you've said, and so we need to find a way to make this work. And I don't know if this perhaps is another chance of regionalization, getting some cooperation from a surrounding community that might already have one, whether we have to rent it from them or pay them a fee to come over and do it for us.
Is that looked into?
The bottom line is, yes, I think we need another truck, but I think we need to keep the dollars as low as possible in that effort.
This isn't one of those vehicles like a larger, like a ladder truck or something that'd be more regional based. Odds are, these are the types of vehicles that are used when needed, but for example, we're all doing certain things at the same time of year for Public Works. You do spring maintenance at the same time of year, you'd probably be running into another community trying to use their same vehicles. We never check that because this is more of a day-to-day usage vehicle than it is a period, like a street sweeper. It's something you don't use every day, you use periodically. Versus this is one that, just from being in town, I see out on the road quite often in the day-to-day operation. So I wouldn't consider this one to be a borrow from another community, especially for a community our size. If we were smaller and we didn't have the infrastructure we had, yes, I wouldn't recommend purchasing one, but with our infrastructure, it's needed.
I looked long and hard for demos, used vehicles, and they're a specialty vehicle. There's not a lot of chassis. And I've looked long and hard for over a year before I even went with this option. I really, truly did. I had Auto Excellence. I had the company helping me. And they're just to fit our needs. You know, some of them are real big, like the lineman trucks with the stabilizers. We can't utilize that. We can't go downtown. We got to shut one lane down. This truck is small. It's almost just like the size of a 1-ton. It doesn't have these big stabilizers. You can park it in a parking spot and work, not interfere with traffic. So it's a versatile vehicle, and it meets our needs. And I did talk to Durham, and we do try to share things with them from time to time. We try to do that with a VAC-on truck, but like the administrator said, at the times when you need it is when they need it, and it didn't work out. It didn't work out for the VAC-on, and that's why we ended up purchasing one. We were spending so much money leasing one and renting one every month between the sewer and us. And now with the demands with the stormwater, you kind of have to have one. But I did look long and hard. Craigslist, online. I don't know if Steve remembers this, but I said, how do you feel about me going to Arkansas with a mechanic to look at one? For some reason down south, there's in Arkansas, Louisiana, there's hundreds of these in the lot, but you look at a picture online and you just don't know what you're getting. I wasn't comfortable proposing that. I did kind of bring it up to Steve, and he said, yeah, it's not happening. But
It wasn't, no, it was,
Saying
yeah, we looked into it.
No
yeah.
salt in a plane ticket,
No.
I'm telling you.
So what was that, you tried to modify Steve's car?
Yeah.
It's a nice looking car. You should put a bucket on it.
Thanks.
Is that it, Councilor Pickering?
It is, thank you, thank you.
Councilor Weinstein.
I just really have a clerical question, that it would be helpful, I think, to have the CIP schedule in the
Yeah.
packets when we are looking at
Absolutely.
vehicles.
I apologize. I typically send that in with my packet, and I did not do that for this, and I apologize for that, but I typically take a snapshot. But it was in for 16 and 17, and I put it off the past 2 years prior to this coming year. But it won't take a sticker for the vehicle itself come June, and then the lift, or the vehicle's in September now. They changed the month, I'm sorry. And the lift is June. So because the body is the stabilization, it's in rough shape. It's 25 years old. It's
Just to let you know, there is, currently in the fund that will be withdrawn, there's 570,000.
It's in the resolution.
Yeah, 540.
Anything else, Councilor Weinstein? Is that it, Councilor Weinstein?
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Levy.
Most of my questions have been answered, but I just have to ask. One, is this the only vehicle that can perform this, meaning at the $50,000 odd range? Could it be a $30,000 vehicle and add it, just to ask the question? And is there another vehicle that we presently own that could be modified to add a lift to it?
There is no vehicle that we currently own that we could utilize to put a lift or an aerial device on.
Okay.
The chassis are very specific, because the chassis is the stabilization for the vehicle, because it doesn't have the stabilizers that go down on the ground. It's very, very key element to this vehicle. And
Then the only thing I would say is, it would be nice to know the difference between a 38-foot and a 29-foot, just from my perspective, lift, if that information could be gotten for us. And I don't know how far we searched for a vehicle, but, you know, and I know we need something. I'm just thinking, if by opening up the bandwidth, so to speak, as far as where we're looking, we could, you know, save 30 to 40,000 on something used, because it doesn't, you know, get a ton of miles. Like a lot of our vehicles, when we need them, but they don't get a ton of miles. I just figured I'd mention that. Yeah.
When Rick said he did open up, he made the joke about Arkansas. He did come into my office to go to Arkansas. There wasn't the savings there to justify him going down there and having to drive the vehicle back. I even said, well, what would it cost to ship? And that would have been expensive as well. The used ones are not that big of a difference between the amounts. I mean, as Rick said, there was a demo that was 5,000 difference. I think the other one may have been in the 10,000 range, but it wasn't the amount of time to get down there and bring it back.
So we just got lucky at the $10,000 deal 20 years ago, because that's
yeah, because it was a retired vehicle from Public Work. I mean, from PSNH, and we don't see those anymore. You don't see them.
That's sort of what I was referring to, because they don't get a ton of miles. You know, we get a lot of vehicles that are 20 years old that have 40,000, 50,000 miles.
Right.
So
you don't see the surplus for them anymore. One, they don't use the smaller vehicles. You see them in the larger ones that Rick, the director, was mentioning. And we usually look also is at the state auctions, and you just don't see anything at the state auctions either.
And then the last thing, just is with respect to the 29 and 38, you know, if it's cleaning the windows a couple of times a year or whatever it is, and we contracted that out, I don't know the difference. I mean, if there's a $5,000 difference, it may not be worth it, but if it's a significant, I don't know.
Does this guy know?
John is the company that did the inspection, and he also works for the company that has the low bid, and he's also, I didn't know this, but he is a resident of Newmarket, so.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
John can probably answer some of your questions, Council.
I can answer a lot of the questions. First of all, the administrator is quite correct in the availability of used product. For several reasons, that marketplace has changed. Years ago, cable TV companies would use a van or a small truck like this. The vans are no longer being manufactured, so they've become a premium item on the secondary market. A lot of the companies that would use a truck like this, the telephone companies, cable television companies, would be similar in size. They're just holding on to them until they run into the ground. So the secondary marketplace for this type of vehicle is really almost non-existent. As a point of fact, we do engage a lot of used equipment in our business for customers that don't want to buy or necessarily can afford a new vehicle. And as a prime example, we purchased a vehicle to resell to a customer of ours in Vermont just recently. And between the Midwest, where it came from, and Raymond, the engine light came on. That was about a $3,800 proposal to replace, to repair the turbocharger and the engine control module. So at the end of the day, we ended up spending quite a bit of money just to get this vehicle to be safe, sane, and roadworthy. So the minor savings that you might see by using a used chassis or purchasing a used complete vehicle in the long run is not necessarily a great value. To address the height issue, our company, in the experience, we've been doing this for 20 years. I'm relatively new to it, but in about the last year or so, calendar year, we have seen, including Exeter, Keene, Franklin, Lebanon, all of them have gone away from smaller type vehicles. In the case of Lebanon, their vehicle did last 25 years. It's kept in a fire station. However, the trend in the public utility field especially is to concentrate on safety, number one, Secondarily, what they're doing is a lot of the poles are taller and they're further set back from the roadway. So as Rick was pointing out earlier, when this vehicle is in the roadway, to have the operator to reach a secondary pole, they may be at the full extent of that 29 feet. The reality, is we see almost no request for 29-foot lifts anymore. Everybody wants to go bigger, and they're thinking long-term because they know that these situations exist where there is no longer the smaller pole or they're working on the lower wires. They're being a multiple-use vehicle. Exeter went through the same thing. They went to a larger vehicle for that reason, as did Lebanon. In the case of remounting this, I strongly disagree with the idea of even doing that, just to save, approximately $30,000. It's not a small fee, but the vehicle that you have right now is really no longer sanctioned by the industry in terms of safety. One of the big things is the existing truck has what we call a walk-through basket or a duck-through basket. It does not have a fully secured basket for the personnel that are inside it. Be closed with a door. It's an open thing with a chain. There are many instances of safety issues where that chain does not get placed by the operator. Someone can get hurt. And these trucks do, I have visual evidence that these trucks do get hit when they're in the roadway. It's not a small thing to think about. Anything we can do to protect our operators is what we're going to do. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. The third thing that we would support, our company is built on service. This particular lift carries a 2-year warranty from the factory. We enhance that by performing any warranty service that we can in the field. So if we can't fix it in the field, we transport it back to Raymond. So that means all the warranty work is covered for 2 full years. This is the only lift manufacturer that is doing this in this industry. And nobody else does what we do for service. So that includes any warranty, minor or major, maintenance is taken care of that way. When it comes to inspections for the lift, we do not necessarily, we don't do any vehicle inspections, so for the actual Ford or Chevrolet or GMC, whatever manufacturer that is, this is actually on a Ford chassis. We don't do that, that's done, you have a local? Okay, so your mechanic will do that inspection. We also do the lift inspection, again, on site, so that it's not necessary to take the vehicle out of service. It takes a couple hours, but it's an annual thing that has to be done. We also enhance what we do with training. So safety training is a big important thing for us. Excuse me. Anything else? Any other questions?
Questions? No questions.
I mean, I can look into the price
Or
of a
question.
smaller lift. I think at the end of the day, to coin an old phrase, penny wise, pound foolish, the poles aren't going to get any shorter in the nearest future.
What is so you don't know the cost difference between the
Off the top of my head, I do not.
Rick, what percentage of the time would you need that extra 10 feet? Sorry, Director Mulaski.
I typically just get in it to do the fire alarm work, and I've had instances where that's happened to me. John's typically the person that's in it 90% of the time, so I don't know where he's like, oh, I need 2 more feet. I know it happens. I mean, we did talk about this in staff meetings. It's not that I didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
But as far as the percentages and things like that, I don't have that answer for you. But there are instances where we just don't quite reach.
Yeah.
So either,
I guess
I would say it encourages safety too. If they have a vehicle that they feel more comfortable is going to meet the criteria of what they need to use. I mean, it sounds like a few feet, but it really can be. There's been instances of people putting unsafe equipment inside the basket just to try to reach that couple extra inches. and that's
Are we doing that, Rick?
We're not doing that.
No.
absolutely.
So we have no instances.
No.
So I
If
feel
it
good
gives them
about
the
that.
confidence, there's not going to be a chance that they would try to do that.
I guess my only thought is if it's like just to get to the roof here, that we need the extra 10 feet, then we could borrow a truck from Durham for the couple times we got to go to the roof here as opposed to.
It's not just here. It's, as was mentioned, it's also it's not just up, it's out as well. You may be going further out but higher up on a pole but it's not 39 feet, but you also have to get that distance. You understand what I'm saying? I use this as an example because somebody said, what's an example? We're in the one building that the bucket can't reach if you went straight up. But there are other examples, so you need the height, the additional height, right?
Like,
But we don't know
for
what the
instance,
We don't
down the
know.
community center, there's site lighting all the way around the building. You can only access that building from 3 sides, so he'll park out front and he has to scope out. He might only be 10 feet in the air, but he scopes out,
Yeah.
30 feet, well, 29 feet,
Well, he can't.
to reach, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
The scoreboards on the ball fields, he goes out, he scopes out, there's so many scenarios that I could throw out there.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, do we need the extra 10 feet for a lot of stuff or a little
John
stuff?
Paholbeck will tell you yes.
And you're buying a vehicle for 20 years.
Right.
And you're buying a vehicle
Say
for
again?
20 years,
The
sorry.
industry validates it too, because the industry has kind of gone away from this type of vehicle as a smaller vehicle, just because of traffic concerns, of basically having to park the vehicle in such a way that it maintains safety and still be able to reach what the work is that's needed to be done.
The biggest thing is like you can get off the road more and then reach up and not have to be so close to the pole. A lot of times, that's what my fear is getting whacked when I'm up there working.
yeah.
And that's what happens, especially today with everybody on their phone, but.
If I could cite an anecdotal truth, one of my coworkers, his son is a union electrician in Rhode Island. They were working on a traffic light system in one of the major cities in Rhode Island with a 4-lane road. Police officer on a detail providing protection. The area was safely coned off, and this kid is a firefighter as well. So he knows safety, and he knows he's been doing it for a long time. And a tractor trailer was not paying attention, and the bucket was actually hit by the tractor trailer. And it can happen. It can happen here, it can happen anywhere. The ability for the operator to set up in a more safe manner and not have to stretch or not have to place his vehicle in a position, it's kind of hard to put a price on that kind of safety.
Yeah, but we're not in a city in Rhode Island.
I understand that, but you have a major traffic thoroughfare through here, Route 108.
Counselor Pickering.
I have been amazed watching the cable trucks out and blocking off one lane, and they are not required to use police details or flagging services, unlike the telephone company and the utility company, the electric company. And safety, yeah, I wouldn't want to be up in that bucket and get hit by a vehicle. That wouldn't be pretty.
It really it allows you to park more out of the way and then reach up over to where you have to go. You get that extra reach, and that's it's not always so much the height as reaching out.
And sometimes that reach is achieved from being off the main roadway, so that you can get behind and kind of reach around instead of being in the roadway and getting next to the pole, which is typically next to
Well,
the
I don't want to argue the point, but most of our work is not on the main roadway with this truck, right?
No, it is. Actually, it's
It's
downtown.
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 The biggest thing that we actually do
Absolutely.
with this now is the lights.
But how often are we changing those?
It's more frequent than you think. A bulb starts cycling, especially downtown, everybody complains about the visibility. Just did removal 2 nights ago when there was 4 lights cycling. And it's not always the ballast, so they went out today and they changed those 4 bulbs, and then we'll see if they're cycling. Sometimes it's the ballast, sometimes it's the light. But, we have over 100 of them now.
Yeah.
And the bulk of what he does is from this building to the bridge. That's the bulk of, obviously he's out on the buildings too, but you know how tight it is down.
Oh, yeah. Other questions?
Only because they're bringing lights up so much. Are we ever going to convert over to LED, which would,
Yes, we just put out our bid specs today.
so that's going to respectfully eliminate a lot of the changing of the bulbs, isn't it?
Not if there's an electrical problem, no, we still have to get up there and do it. It doesn't,
No, I get that, but they're going to last a lot significantly longer, I'm thinking. Anyway, it would just be nice to know if we were talking about, 5,000 or 20,000, if it's a few $1,000s for the bigger one, I just have no idea what the pricing is on this, I don't know. So,
I feel like I gave you something that really is gonna fit and meet our needs, and we're gonna keep this for 20 years. and that's my feeling on it. I spoke with the person that's in it 90% of the time. I know I'm in it a small percentage, and a couple other people, but I think it's the right thing to do for our department and the town, in my opinion.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Administrator, the vote.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Pickering.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Levy.
Aye.
Counselor Nazaro.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Director Malasky.
Good for 25 years.
I will accept a motion nominating Bill Archeri to a 2-year term to the dam study.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Administrator, the vote.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Pickering.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Levy.
Aye.
Counselor Nazaro.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Motion, new business, motions in the first reading, or resolutions in the first reading. Resolution 2015-16-34, to authorize the town administrator to enter into a general services agreement with Underwood Engineers for general engineering services. Whereas the town of Newmarket historically is contracted with multiple engineering firms for its operational needs, and whereas the town desires to have a town engineer that will provide general engineering services, and whereas a formal request for proposals was issued and 6 firms responded, and whereas through a selection and interview process, Underwood Engineers was selected, now therefore be it resolved, the Newmarket Town Council does hereby authorize the town administrator to enter into contract with Underwood Engineers for general engineering services. First reading, February 17th, 2016. Closing correspondence and comments by councilors. Mr. Administrator, do you, well, first of all, we'll ask if they have any closing comments? Can you just run over what the do-outs are for next
Letter
meeting?
of continued support to the byways and the fiscal year report, update on whether or not we're gonna have the elderly housing ordinance by the end of fiscal year. Make sure we have a CIP schedule when purchasing something from there. That's all I have.
That's all we have. Councilors, anyone remember any of the do-outs?
I thought there was something else, and I don't, I've lost it.
All right.
Okay.
Seeing none, our next meeting is March 2nd at 7 o'clock.
Yep.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We stand adjourned.
I still have a question if possible.
Oh, stand by. Yes,
Wait, so on.
Administrator,
Okay.
go ahead.
last meeting I asked in reference to recyclables in Epping, if you had an opportunity to call them to see how that's working out for them nowadays.
The transfer station, you mean?
Yeah.
I'll talk to Greg.
Let's add that to the do-outs.
Yeah.
Is that it, Councilor Pickering?
Refreshingly, yes.
Then at 8:52, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, councilors.
Are we off the year?